The next morning, I got up earlier, but it was still raining outside. I charged my devices, and around 8:30, I decided to head out anyway. This day's ride was about 300 kilometers from Nema County to a newly built tourist ticket center, where I camped for a night. Along the way, I also passed a stunning lake.
Well, good morning. Not a good day. Altitude 4,538 meters. Temperature 7 Celsius. I plan to backtrack 30 kilometers.
The reason I backtracked here was because I had missed a scenic spot the day before. It was right by the roadside and definitely not something you'd want to miss. You won't regret seeing it. It's basically a geological wonder. So I arrived, and from the ground it honestly didn't look like anything special. But what you really needed here was a drone, because only from the air could you see what was hiding behind the fence. This place is called the Tree of the Earth. It formed from Lloyd's erosion and water carving everything away, creating these tree-like patterns. From above, it looked absolutely unreal, almost magic. Nature's carving skills are pretty amazing, aren't they? After visiting the Tree of the Earth, I turned around and continued the ride for a day. The sky turned blue for a moment, but it didn't last long. As I headed towards Nima County, seeing clouds rolling again, and I figured I was riding back into the rain. I also saw a couple riding a motorcycle together, way faster than me. I couldn't help wondering, riding together like that, maybe that's true love. Who knows? I rode into Nima County around noon. I decided to fill up the tank first, so I headed to this gas station. The entrance was flooded with muddy water, honestly. Like always, I had to park the bike in the designated spots, grab an air bucket by the gasoline, and then pour it into the tank myself. It was already 12:20 when I rode out of the gas station. I stopped by this Muslim shop and bought some steamed buns, toasted them into my top box, and figured everything was sorted. Time to get back on the road.
Okay, I'm getting out of this town, Nima town, and move to the next one, Wenbunan Village. About 3 hours ride. There's a very beautiful lake there, but I got no intention to move any further because one day's ride is not enough to cover all the distance. Auspicious sign is that I'm heading to the blue sky. Hopefully there will be no rainfall in front.
I rode for a while without seeing a single vehicle. I pulled over to take a break and eat a couple of buns. The land out here was starting to look almost desert-like, with a tiny village way off in the distance. Such a remote place, it felt completely separated from the modern world. I ran into the cyclist. One was actually from the city where I work, and the other was over 65 years old. This place was incredibly remote and the altitude was super high. Their stamina was just unbelievable. The altitude kept climbing and the scenery became more and more vast and desolate.
My altitude right now is 4,852 meters. Here's a point. Well, scenery here is amazing. Altitude 4,922 meters. Only one here still. I just wonder how will those pedalists make it, because it was 6 kilometers uphill slope. crazy people. I quite enjoy the serenity and solitude here.
I started descending for a bit, but not for long. Then the road climbed again, another mountain pass ahead.
For 1,927 meters. Look at this amazing scenery. Wow, there's another lake. What a stunning view.
There were tons of switchbacks winding me down, and the altitude dropped a bit. I was getting closer and closer to a lake, like a fairy tale hidden and cradled by these secret mountains. There was a small village by the edge of the lake, so I decided to grab some Tibetan food. It was already around 3 p.m. The first place I tried was closed, but this lady was kind enough to point me to another one that was open, so I went there.
这个啊，
在这里有饭。
好嘞。
The restaurant was decorated in a Tibetan style. I had noodles with yak meat, kind of spicy. After lunch, I hooked back on the bike, turned around, and continued the ride. Just after leaving the village, I stopped again. The scenery was just too beautiful to ignore. The lake, yaks, prayer wheels spinning with the creek, and locals watching nearby. I looked back towards the village, remote but incredibly peaceful.
Serene lake surface, rippled. Very beautiful and majestic mountains behind me. Also glacier over there. And I went from there all the way, just circle this lake to where I am right now.
I enjoyed the quiet time by the lakeside, though it was a shame to see some trash at such a beautiful place. Then I got back on the road. There was sheep everywhere along the shore, even though the grassland wasn't exactly lush. I couldn't resist stopping for a few more photos before finally saying goodbye to this peaceful lake. At this fork, I took the left path, which led towards the ticket center for another stunning lake, the Dangreyongcuo. The place was newly built and completely empty, so I decided to camp here instead. Honestly, it felt like a pretty solid protection from bears. I was honestly amazed at how many empty rooms there were. It gave me plenty of options. I even checked out the toilet. Overall, it was a great camping spot. The only downside, if I had to pick one, was the lack of water.
As you can see, I got myself a very nice camping site behind me. newly constructed, but no people inside. I've checked this one. I can access this one. Open, open, open. You know, if I choose this too, I can start myself as a new job, doorkeeper. This is a back door. Holy. Oh. It's funny, right? But the smell is newly constructed, refurbished. Afraid I'll formality hat.
There was still some light left, so I went up to the viewing platform and looked out over the lake in the distance, the one I'd be riding along the next day.
Check these holes on these grasslands. They are all homes for mammoths. Dotted. Densely dotted.
I unloaded my gear from the bike and set up my tent inside one of the spacious rooms with a big window. Then I patched a hole in my waterproof bag, the one for my sleeping bag. After that, I headed out to collect some water, which I needed for basic stuff like brushing my teeth and washing my face. I wasn't lucky enough to find a clean water source, but the scenery around me was so absorbing. I sent the drone up, and in that moment, it felt like I had the road and the distant lake all to myself. Well, I wasn't exactly picky. I spotted a muddy creek nearby, filled up my water bottle with some of that water, and figured it is settled enough to use for washing.
Okay, back to my home. Villa. About to scramble into my tent, then I noticed that there are Tibetan bears, so I need to lock the main door. But the problem is the main door, the latch.
So I used my axe to fix the latch and the lock.
This latch. Okay, perfect. Already in my tent, fixed the lock